Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Harrison, and on behalf of AARP, I want to welcome you to this important discussion about the coronavirus. AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan member organization, has been working to promote the health and well-being of older Americans for more than 60 years. In the face of the global coronavirus pandemic, AARP is providing information and resources and working for older adults and those caring for them. The coronavirus pandemic has taken a toll in a variety of ways. One that hasn't been discussed much is its impact on our relationships. Whether struggling with being away from loved ones for extended periods or cooped up with them under the same roof with the virus going on, it can cause extraordinary strains on all of us. Today, we'll discuss how to manage relationships during a pandemic, a challenge you may have noticed is not that easy sometimes. Our guests are two couples who have each co-authored books and will share insights to help strengthen your relationships for the long haul. If you've participated in one of our tele-town halls before, you know this is similar to a radio talk show, and you have the opportunity to ask questions live yourselves. If you'd like to ask a question, press *3 on your telephone to be connected with an AARP staff member who will note your name and your question and place you in a queue to ask that question live. So, hello again. If you're just joining us, I'm Barbara Harrison. On behalf of AARP, I want to welcome you to this important discussion about the impact of the global coronavirus pandemic. We're talking with experts and taking your questions live. To ask your question again, please press *3. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can place your question in the comments area. AARP is convening this teletown hall to help share information about the coronavirus. You should also be aware that the best source of health and medical information is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. It can be reached at cdc.gov/coronavirus. This event is being recorded, and you can access a recording at aarp.org/coronavirus 24 hours after we wrap up. And now I'm excited to introduce our special guests. Marlo Thomas and Phil Donahue are well known to many of us who got to know them through their very successful television careers. But maybe you don't know yet that they are co-authors of the book, What Makes a Marriage Last? 40 celebrated couples share with us the secrets to a happy life. Marlo, of course, is an award-winning actress, author, and activist whose body of work continues to impact American entertainment and culture. Phil is an extraordinary writer, producer, journalist, and media pioneer who revolutionized the talk show format. Who among us right now doesn't know these two? Welcome, Marlo and Phil. We're so happy to have you with us.
Thank you, Barbara.
Pleasure. Thank you, Barbara.
Well, we'll have a lot of questions for you coming up, but also with us, let me introduce Dr. Julia L. Mayer and Dr. Barry J. Jacobs. They're co-authors of the new book, Love and Meaning After 50, the 10 Challenges to Great Relationships and How to Overcome Them. Julia is a clinical psychologist who has been counseling individuals and couples for almost 30 years. Barry also nearly 30 years of experience, is a clinical psychologist, family therapist, and principal at Health Management Associates, a national healthcare consulting firm. It's great to have you both with us, Julia and Barry.
Thank you.
Our pleasure, Barbara.
We'll also be joined by AARP Senior Vice President Jean Setzfan, who will be our organizer and help facilitate your calls today. So, we're ready to get started. Marlo and Phil, let's begin with you. We're talking today, as you know, about strengthening connections during tough times. For your book, you talked with 40 couples of various backgrounds about what it takes to make their relationships last. Well, after you've heard from them, you must have the secret. What is it?
Well, I think the biggest secret that we found is that these people really wanted it to work. They wanted it to last. As Kira Sedgwick said, there is no plan B when you go into a marriage. And I think a lot of them went through marriage counseling. They went through all kinds of hoops to not look for the escape route. You know, they all had tremendous challenges. Jamie Lee Curtis had a drug addiction. David Burka, who's married to Neil Patrick Harris, was an alcoholic. Jesse Jackson wandered outside of marriage and had a baby with another woman. Kira Sedgwick and Kevin Bacon lost all their money to Bernie Madoff. And Michael J. Fox and Tracy Pollan were handed a lifelong diagnosis of Parkinson's from Michael 3 years into their marriage. So all of these couples, and those aren't the only challenges they face. They face lots of other challenges too. But we found that unlike people who do get divorced and cannot stick together, is that they didn't run away from it. They didn't get scared. And we kind of thought after we talked to everybody, we thought, these people are brave. These aren't people who are afraid to hold hands and just go through the fire together. And I think...
who was it said that it's more complicated to get divorced than to tough it out?
Bob Woodward's wife, Elsa Walsh, said, I don't understand this impulse for disruption, the kind of energy that people put into breaking up and going through everything it takes to separate your lives. They took all that energy and put it back into their marriage. They'd have a much more satisfying life. And I think also a lot of people feel that the person you marry is going to make you happy. And Peter Herman, who's married to Mariska Hargitay, said that is a recipe for disaster, that the other person is not going to make you happy. Where you're going to find happiness is in what you build together. And we feel, too, that in our 40 years, that is and we've been through all the ups and downs, through sick children and parents who are sick and dying and ups and downs in our careers. What's kept us together is that we faced the hard times together. And when one of us was down, the other one helped pick us back up. And I think that's it. When they say commitment, that's what they mean, that you've committed to it. You're not going to look for the exit sign when things get tough.
And there is no such thing as a marriage that takes off and soars for a lifetime and then lands softly on a bunch of golden leaves.
Yeah.
Everybody we talked to had a major, unexpected, you can't make this up, there was no way for them to anticipate it, kind of drama in their lives.
I mean, Judy Woodruff and Al Hunt, who have 3 children, their firstborn had spina bifida. So they have lived an entire lifetime of keeping this child together and healthy and keeping the family together throughout it. When you walk down that aisle and you say, for better or worse, rich or poor, in sickness and in health, they seem like, kind of romantic words. But as life goes on, you are going to find richer for poor in sickness and health and better and worse.
And some people fell in love with the wedding.
Right.
The preparation and the who sits here and there and the white dress and the rice. I mean, it's pretty.
Yeah, and being the star couple for the day. Yeah, that Kevin Bacon said, people should not even think about a wedding. It is so insignificant. We got married in our parents' living room with 35 people, just our family, which I think is a great way to get married. But I don't know if we answered your question, but we came away from this experience. We traveled all over the country and even to Toronto to get Elton John and David Furnish. But we met each couple face to face, like a double date, for 2.5, 3 hours. And we came away feeling really energized by the love and commitment that we saw.
I was surprised at how candid everybody was. I mean, everybody.
Yeah.
They looked at us when we first walked in the apartment or wherever they lived. I remember they looked at us as if to say, now, where are you going with it? And so, whenever I mentioned our own marriage,
right,
that seemed to blow the door open, and right. They couldn't stop talking about theirs.
And there were also career difficulties. Tony Shalhoub married Brooke Adams when she was a very big star. She was the star of Heidi Chronicles. He had a featured part. And she had many, many fine films, Terry Malick's Days of Heaven, a lot of really great films. And he was sort of a featured player. now after Monk, several years of Monk and the band's visit on Broadway and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, he is at the top of the A-list. And she's having trouble getting work at her age, which I certainly know something about. So that was a complete shift in their lives.
I had that problem. I mean, I couldn't get through an airport without people knocking me over to get to Marlo. And, you know, sooner or later, well, I'm telling you, sooner or later, somebody in the little queue would recognize me and they'd say, "Oh, we like you too, Regis." So famous meeting, I tell you.
Well, actually, we've been very lucky because we've had very big careers, thank God. We worked really hard for them. And so we're both sort of equally known. And that's a big help. That's a big help. It really is. It's very hard. I mean, Trudy Styler, who's married to Sting, and Simone Smith, who's married to LL Cool J. You know, these are women who are dealing with sex symbols, very, very famous men, and people are often pushing them aside. Ray Romano's wife, Anna, said the same thing. People push her aside to get to him, and that's got to be very uncomfortable. Thankfully, we have not had that, but that is what people deal with in their marriages. And these celebrity marriages, you know, one of the interviewers said to us, "Well, you only interviewed famous people. You know, they don't have the same problems as regular people." And the truth is, yes, they do. They have all the same problems. They may not have the same financial problems, and they've worked hard to get where they are, but they have all the other problems. They have health, and they have loss of money. They have sick children. They have all the other things: jealousy, betrayals. You know, as Ray Romano said, you walk in your house and you close the door, and you're no longer a celebrity. You're just a guy and a woman who are trying to make it work with all the issues that come up that break people apart.
Very good point. And that book has 40 stories like that in there, and I know that a lot of people would enjoy reading. You want to show us your book? I know you've got it with you there.
My husband has it here. There you go.
It's a big one and a thick one.
Yeah, it's the core stuff.
It's called What Makes a Marriage Last. It's 600 pages. It was supposed to be...
I got to show you. I'm sorry.
It was supposed to be about 350 pages because we had told our publisher at Harper's that each story would be about 2,500 words. But the stories were so good and so rich that they turned out to be 5,000, 6,000 words.
Wow.
And we didn't want to cut them down. And we tried to, but we kept saying, boy, if you cut that out, you don't understand who they are. So we turned it in twice as long, and we kind of got under the covers and waited for them to scream. But our publisher, Judith Kerr, said, no, it's great. Let's go with it this big.
Was this our first interview?
Yes, our first interview was
Look at this.
President and Rosalind Carter. Phil loves this picture.
Wow.
They're so adorable. She was 19, he was 21. One of the things that's fun about the book is that everybody has their wedding picture. Now, they've been married 74 years. Alan Alda's married 60 years. Billy Crystal's married 50 years. But we also have couples in our book that were married 18 years. We wanted to get a lot of generations. And that was exciting. You know, we wanted to see, okay, if you've been married 60 years or 18 years, if you're black, white, brown, Asian, if you're a Christian, a Jew, a Baptist, a Muslim,
straight or gay,
and if you're a same-sex or opposite-sex marriage, what are the differences in all of those marriages from each other? And the truth is that there's no difference. Everybody wants the same thing. They want a safe place. They want somebody who's got their back. They want somebody they can trust in the real sense of the word. For me, trust, yes, of course, it's about a sexual commitment. Yes, there's that. But there's also trust. I can trust Phil with my head. He is not going to bulldoze me. He's not going to finesse me. He's going to give me the honest-to-God truth. And that's what I think is one of the big things that makes a marriage last, is that you have the trust that this person is beneath you, underneath you, around you, above you, in front of you, behind you, that they're with you. That's huge to me.
Trust is the most important thing. I agree with that. And Marlo and Phil, was there anything you learned through your conversations that you just loved and want to share with us today?
Well, I think that you should tell the James Carville story. It's very practical and it's interesting to me. Tell them that.
James Carville has when you find yourself going around and around on a silly, unimportant issue,
But that's driving you crazy and you're going around and around about it.
You can make a real stop to this waste of time by saying, let's kick that can down the road. Now, this very cliched, overworked euphemism really made an impact on us, or me. I've already used it. Let's kick that can down the road.
Yeah.
We both start laughing.
Yeah, because some of these things are you said you would do it, but you didn't do it, but you didn't put it there, but I said you put it here, blah 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 blah, around and around and around. And finally he'll say to me, "Oh, let's just kick this can down the road." And it's become the great stopper, because you waste a lot of time with this stuff. The other thing that I found very helpful was Judith Viorst, who's written many, many children's books and some adult books as well. She said, they're married 60 years. Her husband's a journalist. And she said, no matter how hard you try, he's never going to be you. And you're never going to be him. So that's a given. Now let's try to accommodate this other person and let them be. I mean, that's who he is. Phil is a very laid-back guy, as you can tell from this conversation. And I'm a very talkative, assertive person. And we fought for years about that. I would say, well, why aren't you getting excited about this? Can't you see what this means? And he would say to me, what are you getting so excited about? What is the big deal about this? So it was really difficult. It took us years to not be mad at each other for the different way in which we approach problems. And after a while, I started to realize maybe the best thing isn't to jump impulsively and make a call to solve this. Maybe it is better, as he's suggesting, to lay back a little bit and talk it through. And there are often times when he'll say, maybe you're right. Let's just get to the bottom line on this. Let's make the call. So we've started to, I shouldn't say started, it happened about 20 years ago. I think we started to find a way to negotiate our different approaches to problems, challenges, than fighting the fact that you never do this. Well, you always do that. We've made that. Those are dirty words to us. You're not allowed to say never and always, because that's not ever true. To say you never do that. Well, you always do that. So we haven't been to marriage counseling, but we've certainly marriage counseled our own way.
We sure could have used it.
Yeah, we could have. Our first 10 years were really tough. We fought a lot, but we were in a power struggle. And we're both type A personalities. We're both bossy. We're both used to running our own shows. And we got married in our 40s. So we came at this with a lot of power. And we had a power struggle for a couple of years. And we fought our way through that. I think it could have broken us up. It could have been what they call irreconcilable differences. But we loved each other enough and we liked each other enough that we fought our way through it, which was, I think, pretty good.
Sounds pretty good to me. And I like that expression, kick that can down the road. I'm going to remember that one. Now, with so many of us distanced from loved ones during this time, are there any suggestions from your relationship or from your book for creative ways or maybe just some little things that we can do to show someone we're thinking of them?
Well, we've done a lot of Zoom calls with our family. We've got a Father's Day Zoom coming up on Sunday. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, just kind of thinking of ways that might be unexpected to the other person in your relationship. But that's a good idea. You can use the Zoom call, and there are lots of other things. But you don't think gifts and that sort of thing are really necessary?
Well, we don't go anywhere. We'd have to order it online. We haven't been sending a lot. Actually, a lot of people in this country who are hurting. They're ill, or they've lost loved ones. So I don't take it lightly that what this pandemic has meant. In fact, we have several friends who are sick, and one of our friends died from it. A man that I had been in a couple of plays with, Mark Blum, a wonderful actor. So we have been touched by the pandemic, thankfully not in our immediate family, but in our circle of friends. And I say that because I'm cognizant, we're both cognizant of what's happening in the world. For us, this quarantine has been good for us. We're usually so busy. We've never had 3 meals a day together except when we go on vacation. And we have a housekeeper, and she hasn't come in for 2 months. So we've made our meals together, and we've had them together, and that's unusual because usually we get up in the morning. Whoever gets up to go somewhere has their breakfast. Lunchtime, I'm usually eating sandwich in the back of an Uber on my way to a meeting, and dinner we have together. But 3 meals a day and fixing them together, that's been unusual. Do you want to add to that in any way? I'm sorry, I'm talking too much as usual.
No, wow, darling. I mean, I enjoy listening to your voice.
You know, I think a lot of us have noticed that too about this pandemic. There have been some good things, and having more togetherness is certainly one of them. You know, among the many things the pandemic has highlighted also is how critical it is to stay connected to loved ones in difficult times. I wanted to let our listeners know that AARP has been working to help keep people connected in a variety of ways. AARP has fought to ensure that those in nursing homes and assisted living facilities have a way of staying in contact with loved ones on the outside. AARP created a free service called AARP Friendly Voices so people who are isolated can get a call from one of our volunteers. The organization has also worked at the federal, state, and local level to ensure that people have safe, secure, and connected places to live throughout this crisis by fighting to prevent evictions and utility and broadband disconnections. We have a lot of questions coming in already, so let's get in some for you, Marlo and Phil. But first, before we do that, let's remind everybody you have a question. You have to press *3 at any time on your telephone keypad to be connected with AARP staff to share that question. And if you're watching, you can share a comment on Facebook or YouTube. I'd also like to introduce you to Jean Setzfand, who is helping to facilitate our calls. Welcome, Jean.
Thanks, Barbara. Delighted to be here.
And Jean, let's take our first question now from Marlo and Phil. Who have you got?
Our first call is coming from Colette from Florida.
Let's.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, perfect. Marlo, Phil, good evening. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you. I've been listening this whole time, and I understand, the things you recommend for when people are married. But as you've looked back on these 40 couples and your own marriage, is there a thread? Is there a commonality? Is there one thing that tells you this is the right person to start this journey with?
You know, I have to tell you, I had Renee Taylor and Joe Bologna on my TV program. And then they were sitting right next to each other. And a woman in the back row stood and she said, "Renee, how did you know?" And Renee said, I thought about it, and then I came to the conclusion that I'm not going to do any better than this. Well, of course, the whole audience started laughing. And he took it well. He laughed. I I just took a little time not answering her question. Have you got a good?
Well, to answer your question, a, a, almost everyone had a moment where they looked harder at this person and thought, yeah, I can trust them. Or, yes, this person will tell me the truth. A lot of them got married, as we did, in a cloud of lust. And that's good and bad. I mean, it's sure a good way to start. But you sometimes get so, smoky eyed from the cloud of lust that you may not see a bunch of problems. But I think each couple talked about what the other one did that really made them look harder at them and think, oh, I can reveal this about myself. I can, Viola Davis. What did she say about the percentages?
It's not 50-50. It's 100-100. And there's,
She also said, you're not really married when you walk down the aisle. You're really married when you're sitting across the table from your spouse and they do something that's really like disgusting to you. The way they chew, the way they lick their fingers, what they slurp their soup, whatever it is, the way they talk on the phone, the way they behave. When you look at that person and say, "Oh my God, this is going to drive me crazy," you look at that person and say, "Yeah, but I love him. I'm going to accommodate that." That's when you're really married. And I think that word accommodate is just a huge word. It's not about giving up. It's not about compromising. And it's sure not about changing somebody, because that really is a kiss of death. If you think you're going to change somebody, which we try to do for several years, I'm going to stop him from doing that. I'm going to stop her from taking too much luggage. I'm going to stop him from whatever it was. We had to come to the place where he's who he is, I'm who I am, and we'll talk about it, but we're not going to try to change each other. That's just death.
I interviewed Billy Graham on my TV program, and I asked him if he'd ever considered divorce. And he said, divorce? Never. Murder? Yes.
He's the comic relief.
I think we've got a call coming in for you. Well, let's go to Jean Setzfan. What have you got?
All right, Barbara, we have Judy from New York.
Judy from New York?
Hi,
What's
Dee.
your question?
Hi. It's a pleasure to be here, and I can't believe this just fell into my lap, literally, at the most perfect time. Being happily married for 34 years, just by the skin of our teeth, last week, this pandemic absolutely has been the test of 34 years. So when I listen to you sharing about making your meals together, it sounds like you didn't say, and we almost killed each other. And I'm just wondering, sometimes, at least during the past 13 weeks, we've found that sometimes I don't want to make my meal with him, and sometimes I don't want him in the room with me, and sometimes he doesn't want me in the room with him. And looking for just some thoughts on moving forward, how to be okay with saying I need some space.
Well, I think one of the things that we're lucky about is that we have an apartment where we each have our own workspace, so that we can go off to our different workspaces. I have a small study. He has a small study. And I can do my work. I can work on my computer. I can talk on the phone to my friends or my colleagues, and he can do the same in his space. So I think that, yes, having your own space is a very big thing. I think if we were on top of each other in a tiny little space, I don't know how that would go. And I do have a very close friend who's a writer. He works from home, and his wife works outside of the home. And so they've been quarantined all this time, and that's been difficult for them because he has a workspace and she doesn't. So they're on top of each other, and that's been difficult to make a sort of a traffic pattern where he can talk on the phone, where he's not interrupting her calls. So, yeah, it's got a lot to do with space. You're absolutely right. We all need space away from each other. we've always had a lot of space from each other because we've always had careers that took us away. So that we have known how to do. We have not had 3 meals a day together, and that, I guess, became something that was fun or nice because we had more time for real conversation. I mean, Phil started telling me he was finding things out about me that he didn't know before. What did you say? I was a what?
She's a water bug. She does. She's got the computer going. She's got the phone here, and opening the mail with the whatever time is left. And I've never seen this all at once. I knew she was an A personality, and that, you know, if you put 9 people in her office, she'll give them all something to do. And she is she's a very talented person, and whatever she starts, she finishes. And so that has always impressed me. And I never had such a close-up look at this feature of her personality since the beginning of the
because I work a lot outside of the home. You know, I'm at a studio, I'm at offices, I'm in meetings, and so he doesn't see me all day long, you know, doing what I do in one place. So that is different. And I have come to appreciate the fact that he's a laid back guy. You know, he's a thoughtful man. You know, and that the interesting thing is that when I'm in my workspace, he'll come in with the New York Times, to read me an editorial piece that he thinks I would really like. And that's something that we don't do a lot of because we're not always at home together. But the idea is he's read it, he's found it thought-provoking, he wants to read it to me and see what I think about it, and kind of an excitement, like a kid, he wants to, you know, talk it over, this interesting editorial he's just read. Or he's angry about it, wants to know if I'm as pissed off as he is about it. So that's a feature that we haven't done a lot of, that having the time, even though we're not in the same room, he'll bring his interest into my workspace. So that's another thing that we're having more of that kind of conversation. You know, I feel kind of bad. We're monopolizing this day, and you have these wonderful authors here. Have we taken up too much time?
No, absolutely not. We've got time for both of you couples here, and we will get back to you shortly. But let's turn to Julia and Barry now. During this pandemic, when more of us are experiencing a sense of loss of varying degrees of people, jobs, economic security, even our sense of safety and freedoms, how can we as partners cope with the coronavirus grief in a way that will strengthen a relationship? Julia, Barry, want to talk about that?
Yes, I mean, grief is an emotion that is very difficult for a lot of folks, though it's a very normal emotion, one that we all experience at various times in our lives. And, you know, to us, what we talk about with our clients is the importance for couples to turn toward one another rather than turn one away from one another when grieving. There are folks that when they commiserate together, it really does strengthen their relationship. They support one another, and they're kind of united in common feeling for the loss that they're experiencing, and that really deepens their relationship. I'll say, talking about our relationship for we've been married for 30 years, is that we too have been through many adverse times in our lives, and including the losses of our parents, sometimes under very difficult circumstances. And the fact that I could turn to Julie and she was so good with my mother and stepfather as they were declining from dementia, and then when they died, I could rely on her in every way, logistically, but even more importantly, emotionally. And that I think was a very important time in our marriage. We certainly see that with our own clients as well.
Yeah, and one of the things we sometimes see with our clients is when they don't grieve together, what you see is irritability. They pick at each other, they get short-tempered, And when we're working with a couple, we'll often suggest to them that if their partner is irritable, that maybe he or she has some feelings that need to be shared that are painful or difficult to access. And hopefully they will sit down together and get past the irritability to the more complicated and painful feelings.
Well, tell me, for those of among us now that are watching or listening who happen to be single, widowed, divorced, and they're feeling lonely and isolated in ways that they'd never experienced before, what advice do you have on ways to build a community, to find some new connections? Any ideas?
I have quite a few single clients, and they're still going on dating sites if they're looking to meet that special person. And in a way, it's a little bit of a silver lining because they have to take quite a bit longer to actually meet in person because of the coronavirus. And it gives them an opportunity to communicate more and more deeply. And then, when they finally meet, one of my clients told me, they put on their masks, they meet on a park bench, and she sits on one side and he sits all the way on the other side, and they talk. So that's one thing that people seem to be continuing to do. We also talk to single clients about participating in if they are in a religious community, many of them are doing online video congregation meetings and services, and they could attend those. And I always think that if you're lonely, go volunteer. Go do something that feels meaningful, like deliver food to a food bank. And you will meet other people who are caring and concerned.
That's a very good idea. Now, we're at a time when more people than ever are caring for family members. Children are home, and we have to care for older family members in new and different ways. Julia and Barry, how can people ensure that they are prioritizing relationships with their significant others while caring for other loved ones? Any ideas about that?
Yes, I think it's a very important question, Barbara, because as you say, many folks have, all of us have multiple family roles. We're not just spouses, we are children oftentimes of aging parents. We have our own children in many instances, and we have responsibilities to multiple people often at the same time, as well as our jobs. And so, we all have to do this balancing act. And there can be a time where we spread ourselves so thin, trying to please everybody, that we don't ever feel like we're pleasing anybody, because we are not giving any one person enough of our time and attention. And I would say that maintaining the primary priority on the marital relationship, that your partner is extremely important to keep going. And sometimes that means compartmentalizing your life a little bit, having time spent with a parent, but also having protected time with your spouse. We see that certainly in the pandemic, and in our caregiving years, we had to very consciously make that decision to make sure that we were not allowing caregiving duties to take over all of our time, but that we were prioritizing our time together away from our care of others.
One of the things that we sometimes suggest to couples that work with us is devise a schedule. Actually plan out together, or as a family if you're more than two, and leave time for yourself, leave time specifically scheduled for the two of you together as partners, and time for caregiving, and the schedule can continue to be revised depending on what the family needs are.
Good advice. And you have a lot of good advice in your book that's not out quite yet, but it's a great way to take stock in your relationship. We have a lot of questions coming in, and we will be getting back to you with some that are coming from our viewers and listeners. But I'd like to mention that this topic that we're talking about brings to the forefront the challenges that millions of family caregivers are facing right now, particularly those who have loved ones in nursing homes or other types of care facilities. Due to a lack of transparency and insufficient resources, people are having a hard time finding out if there are positive COVID cases in facilities where their family members are living. Making this situation even worse, many people aren't even able to connect with loved ones through video chats or phone phone calls. I know that AARP is urging federal and state policymakers to take action to ensure that residents and staff have adequate testing and protections, and that family members are able to stay connected with and get information about their loved ones. You can learn more about this situation at aarp.org/nursinghomes. And now let's take some more questions from our callers. Just a reminder, to ask your question, please press star 3. If you're watching us, you can place the comment on Facebook or YouTube. So, Jean, what are our first questions for Julia and Barry?
All right, we have a question coming in from Facebook, and this is coming from Julie, and she's asking, how are we supposed to navigate a job loss and marriage, being stuck at home together all the time? I want them to get going, but we're just stuck. Can you advise?
Yes. I mean, so first off, I mean, these are very difficult circumstances, and it's not a surprise if your partner is having trouble getting into gear, because I'm sure he or she needs the shot. What I would say is that it's probably a good idea to, number one, lower your expectations. For your partner to jump right into another plan, but two, to very gently kind of broach the topic is something that the two of you need to sit down and come up with a specific plan that you'll move forward on. So at least both of you feel like you're making some progress. And then thirdly, I would say that particularly in regards to the job loss and given our economy now, we have to all be patient. That this is going to be a trying time for many couples going through this, and they need to, again, turn toward one another and pull together rather than pull apart under these tough times.
Well, we know that this pandemic has resulted in many couples having more time at home together, an experience that may benefit and may also challenge any relationship. So let's get to more of your questions for our couples, Marlo Thomas and Phil Donahue, along with Dr. Julia Mayer and Dr. Barry Jacobs. As a reminder, press star 3 at any time on your telephone keypad to be connected with an AARP staff member to share your question. So let's see if we have any questions waiting for us. But before that, I'd like to get both couples' perspectives on a few other questions. It's fair to say that we're having conversations with our significant others that help us calibrate and help us get in touch with who we are and what we value. Between the pandemic and protests over racial injustice, these meaty discussions are coming at a time of added stress. How do we manage these conversations when our beliefs or values may differ? Julia and Barry, you want to start with an answer to that one?
Sure. I'm working with a couple right now who are on absolutely opposite ends of the political spectrum. And even though they've been married for a couple decades, they are pretty angry with each other and also hurt because they are feeling like their values are no longer aligned. And when I meet with them, what I get them to do is remember that, 95% of their values are still aligned. They've known each other for years. They actually agree on most things, but they're two separate people, like Marlo and Phil were saying before, and they're not going to be the same person, and they shouldn't try to be. But it's really important for them to respect that their perspectives come from their own life history and their own particular views. And then I talk to these couples about how they need to really take the time to listen to one another's views and try to understand each other. They don't have to agree. They have to be respectful. And they need to remember that they care about each other, even though they are not looking at things the same exact way.
Let's ask Phil and Marlo if they have any observations about that. People living together who may not be on the same political side or the same side on a whole lot of things. What do you say?
Well, I think what Julie said is key. She said if 90% of what they have together is aligned, then you have to give way for those differences. We interviewed James Carville and Mary Matlin, and as everybody knows, she is a staunch conservative and he is a staunch liberal. He campaigned for Bill Clinton while she was campaigning for George Bush. I mean, there they were, nose to nose, with two completely different ideologies. They were a million miles apart on the Iraq War, a million miles apart on climate change. And we said to them, how in God's name are you married together with these huge differences? And they said, that's just one set of differences. Our political differences are one set. But we have children, we have family, we have barbecues, we have hiking, we have all kinds of things that are aligned. So our lives are not made up just of our political differences. And I thought that was fascinating. And it's really what Julie was just saying, is that you can't make anything like political differences the center of your marriage and your life. And she was saying that if 90 or 95% of your life is aligned and your values are aligned, then you have to allow for this other percentage that isn't aligned. I mean, we're both very liberal, and we met that way. When I went on the Donahue show, we were talking about the ERA and feminism and all the things that I believed in, that he believed in. But so we're just lucky in that way. We don't have our value, and we were also raised Catholic. I went through Marymount. He went to Notre Dame. So we have a lot of values that are pretty solid inside of us that have helped a lot. I've always felt, even before this book, and maybe Julie and Barry probably have something more important or maybe smarter to say on the topic, but I've always felt if you define what I consider the big words, like good and bad, fair and unfair, acceptable and unacceptable behavior, if you can define those words the same in your life, then I think you have a pretty good starting point at having a trust level. That's kind of I would die to know if what Julie and Barry think about that.
You want to respond to that? Julie,
Sure.
Barry?
I couldn't have said it better. I absolutely agree. It is the main thematic values in your lives that need to be aligned. Not everything, just the most important things.
Yeah, and I would add, I mean, we're focusing on political differences, but as Marlo, you pointed out before, there are temperamental differences, there are differences in emotional expression, there are differences in food preferences. We live with folks, with partners who are not the same as us, and we have to make compromises. We have to. The word you used is accommodate. I think I use the word often accept. We have to accept that the other person is not going to be aligned with us in everything, and that we have to appreciate them for the differences that they have. We may even prefer some of the ways of doing things, and gravitate slowly over the years towards doing things more similar to them. I think that's actually what happens. Is the cliche is that partners become more like one another over time. But there will always be some differences that remain.
Well, Julie and Barry, we've had some people waiting on the phone to ask you some questions. Let's go to Jean and talk to her. Jean, who have you got?
All right, we have Judy from Kentucky.
She's a healthcare baker. Yeah.
Hello.
Expertise is
my name is Judy, and I have a question. I know that I'm not the only one. I'm 73, and I lost my husband suddenly with no warning. He's always been healthy. We met when I was 14 and he was 16. And although we were strict Catholic, we followed all the guidelines of our faith. And then we married, and we've been together 57 years. But we were so involved in each other that I don't know what to do. There's a lot of elderly people out there who have lost their spouses at the beginning of the pandemic. And what do you do? How do you handle that?
Julia, Barry, do you want to try to help her with this?
Yeah, Gene, I would say, first of all, our condolences to you. That's a extremely difficult loss. I think that there's only, losing a child or losing a spouse are the two most difficult things anybody can go through. And it sounds like you and your husband were very devoted to one another for a very long time. I think that grief is a long process. The normal course of bereavement generally is not a matter of weeks or months. It could really be a matter of a couple of years. I would look. It could be more. I would look to your faith for support. I might look to pastoral counseling. And if you're finding that you're unable to really function, that you are so sunk in grief, sunk in despair, that it might be a good idea for you to talk with your primary care provider to see if he or she might have some specific help for you. But I think that we as Americans often underestimate the impact of a loss like this, and that be good to yourself, continue to reach out to others, and again, lean on those who you trust, and lean on your faith if that's helpful to you.
Sadly, we know that there are many out there who are suffering right now from these losses from this pandemic. Let's move on and take more questions from our callers. Jean, who have you got?
We have Doris from South Carolina.
Okay, Dora? Hello.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I am so pleased to be with you tonight because it must have been in the mid-'60s that Phil was in Charleston, South Carolina, producing one of his TV programs from Charleston. And I coordinated it here, and I must have had calls and correspondence with just about every woman in South Carolina, or so it seemed. But this is such a surprise for me tonight because my husband and I have been married for 57 years. And so I can confirm that a lot of what he has written, he has spoken, really works because we use some of the basic things, and the journey has not been without some sorrow and grief, but on the other hand, we see results that we were striving for and that were our expectations, but they were not without work. And I just wanted to say hello, to welcome him, to say thank you. But also, if there is time, I have a couple of things that I would like to confirm about marriage.
Okay.
Right ahead.
Okay, and one is to make sure you have a firm foundation, because if you truly have a normal, good marriage, you will have some factors to overcome and a little bit of work to do. But make sure there's always room in your heart for gratitude. All you have to do is go to a marriage seminar, and when you hear the different stories, you should leave with a grateful heart, knowing that yours isn't quite like that, but there's some things that you could do. And just never consider the word, we may get divorced if things don't work out. We can always separate. Don't consider that. That should not be part of a good marriage. And so keep a thankful heart for what you have, but don't get slack on it, because you need to really more or less court each other, encourage them, reinforce what you had. And, there's just so many things. And if you seek help and one thing doesn't work, don't give up and say, well, that's not for me. There are too many other sources available, and you will find one that will work for you. And I just feel excited knowing that you're still encouraging people, because our two children, we had a tragic loss with our youngest one. He was killed in a Jeep accident shortly after college graduation. And our daughter is married to a retired Air Force pilot, and they are presently, here in the area, and we have 2 grandchildren that we just think if you had the grandchildren first, I think that would end the population because you can't see straight for them usually.
Well, it's so great to have had you call in and share what's going on in your life, and we appreciate your call. We've got other people standing by waiting, and I know Jean is holding on to some right now. Jean, who have you got?
We have Lynn from New York.
Okay, Lynn from New York. Lynn, are you with us?
Yes, I am. My husband and I have been together for 40 years. However, the pandemic has, with us being quarantined, this is the first time in 40 years that we are having difficulty dealing with our anger, our separate angers from all that's going on. We would appreciate any words that would be helpful.
Julia,
I
Barry?
think Julie and Barry know more about that than we do.
Well, I will say to you that when sometimes when couples are having tiffs, sometimes the first question to ask is what's really going on. If they're arguing about a bill, or they're arguing about the way the house is being kept, for instance, is that really the issue at hand, or is there something else fueling the anger? And certainly we live in a very stressful time, and I have seen with some of the couples that I'm working with that it's some of what's going on externally, maybe things that are going on in with other family members that is fueling some of the tension within the marriage. The very kind of sad thing is sometimes the person who we take our frustrations out on is the person with whom we're closest. And it's almost as if we know that we can rely on that person, therefore we can kind of vent at them. But we may be missing the point if we're not also cognizant of other factors going on in our lives. So that would be my first question to you: is there anything else going on that might be getting in the way? The second thing is the issue that Marlo was talking about before, and the issue of space. If you're quarantining together, is there a way of ensuring that you have we time, but also me time, and having enough space within the house to ensure individual time for each of you, so that you're not on each other's nerves all day long, but that you can be apart, you could be together, and when you're together, you're bringing your best selves to the floor.
We found with some couples that they handle stress differently. One person may become a little more needy. I just want a hug. I want attention. I want comfort. And the other person handles stress by being isolative and wanting space. And so I think you have to reflect on what's going on in your couple in terms between you, in terms of what you each need. And like Barry just said, when people bicker, often it's because they have needs that are unmet, that are hard for them to express. Maybe they don't even know they have them. But I always say, start with compassion, even when your partner is irritable with you, and forgiveness, and then try to look at what's going on beneath the surface, because all those years together have been good years. And this is an opportunity to really feel even closer during a difficult time. And it would be such a pity for this time to be one that you feel so disappointed about.
Mm-hmm.
We have gotten into the habit of coming into the other person's space and saying, "What's going on? Tell me what's happening. What are you feeling? Is there something that I did? Why do I feel that you're going through a difficult time right now? Why do I feel that you have some angst going on?" We've been able to do that. I mean, not in our first years of marriage, but as the years have gone by, we've gotten into the habit of asking that question and asking it really gently, and even allowing the fact that one of us could have done something. We really do want everything to be okay. We have a real desire for it to be okay. So we try to gently go to the other one and say, what's happening? Tell me, what is it? Are you going through something that you can share with me? Because we have other people in our lives. We have children, we have brothers and sisters, we have all kinds of people that can bring angst into our lives. So we do take that time. People need space, but they also need each other to come into that space to help. And I think I really feel for this woman. I feel, the fact that she said, we're both not handling anger well. The idea that one of them needs to come forward. I'm sure Barry and Julie have better advice than I do, but it seems that if one person will make that move to say, what's happening? What is it? Or, you know what? I've been cranky. This is what's going on with me. And a lot of times in our lives, Phil will say to me when we've been having a difficult time, he has said to me, look, I'm sorry. I've been really not with it. I've been not the best of myself, but I want you to know it's not about you. I'm going through something. And then I back off. Let him go through that. Let him figure that out. But at least have the idea that I tried, or he'll try with me, and I'll say to him, this is something I just need to get past. I think somebody needs to make a move forward. Either you try to help him, or you say, this is what I'm going through, and break the ice that way, so that there's not that long breach. I'm half Italian and half Lebanese, so I'm not good at breaches. I have to get in and figure out what it is. But anyway, I'm sure Julie and Barry have maybe more to say on the subject, but that's how I feel, that somebody has to be Sadat. Somebody has to cross the desert and say something, either this is what I'm going through, or how can I help you with what you're going through? But to break the impasse.
Well, I certainly agree with that. I'm sure that you do too, Julia and Barry. Somebody's got to break the impasse when there's that kind of thing going on. We can be so stubborn sometimes in relationships and feeling like the victim and don't want to be the one to wave the white flag to try to get back together again. Let's take some more calls. Let's talk to Jean. What have you got?
We have Nadia from Texas.
Nadia from Texas. What's your question?
Hello. Well, Marlo, I'm Italian and Lebanese too. Yes, and I was honored to meet your father in 1981 at an event, and I was sitting with him at the same table, and we talked, and he was smoking his cigar.
Yes, that sounds like him.
Yeah, he was smoking that cigar, and he was talking, and he was the guest of honor. And but the reason I was calling, I've been wanting to talk to you about this so much, but the reason I'm calling also is I've been through, I had a 30-year marriage, and I messed it up. And anyway, communication wasn't good. So I think that communication is important. And I'm strong like you, Marlo. I'm a very strong-willed woman, and I sometimes intimidate people. And I'm a doer, and it's our nature. It's our Lebanese nature, and I can't help it. It's me. And I was in a relationship, and it was hard for him to take, and he wanted to change me and make me somebody else that I wasn't. But anyway, long story short, it ended. I had to end the relationship, and then coronavirus happened. So now I've been alone, which for the first time in my life. But I'm doing great. I'm reading the Bible, and I'm getting closer and closer to the Lord, and it's helping me heal inside. But what can I do what do you do? I can't date right now because I'm afraid to go out with anyone because of this virus. And so I'm really just by myself. And I have family. I can't even go there because I don't want to infect anyone because I don't know if I'm carrying it. So what do you do in this case when you're a person like me that's strong? I'm a doer. I do things. I do a lot of things to occupy my time, but I just don't know what to do.
Maybe
to get over this.
Maybe Julia, Barry, do you have any answers for her?
Well, it's very hard to go through a divorce, even one that you initiated. There's grief, and I think you have to spend some time grieving that relationship. I know you said before that you messed it up, and I seriously believe it takes two people to mess up a relationship. You may have been the person who had a particular behavior to mess it up, but I think it's a joint effort to be in a marriage, and when they fail, both people need to grieve the loss of something that was supposed to be special and sacred. So I think you have some grieving to do. And I think one of the ways you might grieve is to reach out to people you care about, family, friends, people who are trusted in your life, and share. Take some time with them to share your feelings and your experiences, your regrets, what you've learned. And then, or you may want to talk to a professional if those conversations aren't enough for you. But ultimately, your goal is to come to peace with the past. If that relationship is really over, then you want to remember the good. You want to honor the relationship that you had for 30 years. And you and your partner, and if there were any other family members, you want to honor that relationship. The good, the bad, it was a major part of your life. You can't leave it, you can't ignore it, but you have to look for the good in it, and you have to leave the disappointments and the things that were upsetting behind so that you can be in the present and you can start looking forward to figure out what your next steps will be.
Let's see if Jean has any more questions that she has waiting for the four of you. Jean?
Sure. I have a question from Facebook, and this one is for Marlo and Phil. Ellen is asking, is this the first project you've done together? If so, why did you decide to do this one together?
Why don't you take that, honey?
Well, I thought to do a project together with Marlo, I mean, you can see it here. I mean, she says, talk. And so, I clear my throat and she'll do 9 minutes. And I've come to understand this. That's her nature. That's who she is. And I guess the only thing that helped in, even promoting my interest or agreement with this idea of a joint project was my feeling that this was different and that this had a chance to really, make noise. And I spent my whole life with my own show trying to think about issues and people who would make noise. Say something, but make me mad, sad, or glad. And our relationship now, through the virus and through the partnership that we've shared in this book, which turned out to be a doorstop. It's
You're holding up the book.
This is. I learned a lot about her.
I think we never wanted to work on a project together by design, because he's laid back, but he's stubborn and he's bossy, and I'm not laid back and I'm bossy. So I figured we'd kill each other. There'd be nothing left on the floor but an eyelash and some white hair. So we just decided, let's not do that. When we first got married, everybody offered us to host the Emmys together and write books together, do a talk show together, all this stuff. And we both said, no, we should never do that. Let's make our marriage our private space, and we'll do our work not together. But when we got the idea to do this, I had the idea to do the book. And when I went to him and said, let's do this, this could be fun, and it would be really interesting, because people are already always asking about what makes our marriage work, which I have no idea how it works. And if we talk to a lot of people, it could be fun to find the secret sauce. And he said, okay, I'll do it, but I'm not talking about our marriage, because he's super private. So I said, okay, you don't have to. But once we went out there, we were both talking about our marriage. We were having a good time talking about our experiences and hearing other people's experiences. So it was fun. It was kind of like a double date. And it turned out to be something more fun than we thought it would be. And now we're going to do a podcast based on the book. So we broke through a barrier that we had created 40 years ago. And now we're kind of enjoying the fact that our two different personalities do work. Also, I have such respect for Phil. I was kind of intimidated because I thought he's the master interviewer. He doesn't like to be interviewed, as you can tell. He answers few of the questions, but he loves to ask questions. And he always asks the best questions. So at first I was a little bit intimidated that I shouldn't be asking so many questions because he's got the gold. But he made room for me, and then he would come in and sort of, clean up the whole thing and make it juicier at the end. Because he's got the gift. He really does. He knows how to when to come in with the important question. So it was interesting. It was very, very interesting. I don't know if we answered the question. I went off on a tangent there, but
I think you did answer the question. And of course, we do know Phil definitely knows how to ask questions. We all watched so many of his shows where he interviewed everyone in the world. Well, we often hear about the importance of staying in a relationship through good times and bad. Julia and Barry, that's good advice for many of us, but how can someone determine when it's truly time to move on? You have an answer for that one?
Well, I think it really depends, but hopefully it's after a whole lot of effort to understand what went wrong. Because usually when a marriage starts, it's, as Marla said, it's romantic, it's exciting. Those are the things that you want to keep in your marriage. And if they haven't stayed, then something's changed. But it could be that you've done everything that you can. You've gone to marriage counseling, you've read books, you've talked to people, you've sat down together and tried to understand what each of you needs, and you're just not seeing eye to eye. And if that's the case, then you may decide to get divorced. But there are a lot of risks with divorce. People who are isolated and lonely tend to have negative health outcomes. There are often financial strains when people get divorced. And it has a big impact on adult children, on friends and other family. So when people get divorced, we sometimes help them through the process by trying to help them, sort of like how I answered the last question, leave the past behind, keep the good, respect what they have together, and hopefully wind up at least as friendly acquaintances, if not friends. Maybe their marriage didn't work, but they know each other so well that maybe they can have a friendship. And that would be so much easier on the extended family and their friends. And it would be a lot happier for them, and it would make it more likely for them to be able to actually move on to maybe another relationship.
Yeah, I would like to add to that the divorce rate among people over 50 has really increased greatly in the last 20 years. For folks over 50, it's doubled. For folks over 65, it's tripled. And so there are more people in midlife who are deciding to take a chance, maybe to find a better partner, or maybe they've just got so sick of the partner that they have that they don't want any partner. And really, as Julie said, we understand when people are chronically unhappy that they need to leave a marriage, but it really is something that has to be thought through very carefully because of all the ramifications it has. and the risk of further unhappiness, unfortunately. So we would hope that people would talk with an attorney and maybe talk with a therapist or talk with some other counselor that could kind of help them consider everything that's going on from every angle and make a really informed, prudent choice.
Good advice. We're going to take some more questions. Callers, just a reminder, you can ask a question by pressing *3 on your telephone keypad. Jean, you have some questioners waiting for us?
We do. So we have Connie from Oregon City.
Okay, Connie, what have
Hi,
you?
I have a question for Marlo and Phil.
Okay.
When this coronavirus thing first started, my husband and I, we've been married for 45 years, and we thought, well, we can either go, oh my God, this is horrible, or we can tell ourselves, we've got this, we were made for this, let's figure out how to have some fun and make life still enjoyable, even though the world's rather sad right now. And I'm just curious, in your own relationship and people that you interviewed, if you have tips, because so much time has gone on, it's getting more challenging to find lightheartedness, fun, and humor in your day.
Well, I think, what we've heard from the friends, of course, when we were interviewing people for the book, we didn't have a pandemic. So, but I know from our friends, we've been doing Zoom nights with friends. We have cocktail parties by Zoom. We each bring our own drink, obviously, and we chat for an hour and a half, and have like a little Zoom cocktail party with usually 6 of us or 8 of us. We have movie nights.
Yeah, Marlo's very clever. I could watch evening cable news every night.
All night. That's a big difference between us. I can watch for an hour. I figure I got it. He's got to watch every single hour.
Well, I mean, this is the place where I used to make a living until I was fired because of my opposition to the Iraq war. So now I'm peeking in the window from the office where I was fired to see if they're still talking about me.
But
but
the point is, he loves the news.
By the way,
he loves the news, and I like entertainment. I like comedies, and so I'll make popcorn. I have either do the dance of the 7 veils or make popcorn, and he can smell that, and then I can get him to watch a movie with me, and which has been fun because, I grew up in comedy. My dad, Danny Thomas, was a comedian, and so we always had comedy movies on Friday nights at our house. So I've been able to introduce him to the great Mel Brooks comedies like To Be or Not to Be, or Albert Brooks's Defending Your Life, the Woody Allen stuff. I mean, there's so many, Marx Brothers, there's so many great comedies. So I've been able to pull him over to do that. So I think one of the things that is interesting about being stuck together is you do a little bit more of what the other one likes. So I'm watching a little bit more of the news shows and finding that there are a couple of these commentators. Like, I've really gotten into Chris Cuomo, and I think Brian Williams does a great job. So usually I like to watch 1 hour, and pretty much in the hour you get the whole ball game. And then you watch the next hour, and they're talking about the same exact facts, but with a little bit of a twist. And Phil loves that. The other night, he was watching C-SPAN, watching the vote of the Supreme Court, which I never watch. But I got into it, and I said to him, wow, this is exciting to watch the Supreme Court vote. I would have never thought that. But there they all were, Ginsburg and Alito and Roberts and Sotomayor. I was really enjoying it. So I've gotten a little, because there's so much time. Yeah, the audio. They have the audio, but they have the pictures of each judge. But it's on C-SPAN, so it's very live, and it's very interesting. You can hear the lawyers, the prosecutors, the defenders, the judges. It was very interesting. So I'm watching a little more C-SPAN. He's watching a few more movies. So I think one of the things that does happen when you have all this time is that you start to maybe motivate a little bit over toward his side, and then he comes a little bit over to my side. So because there's so much time, ordinarily you wouldn't have all that kind of time to spend, and I wouldn't want to spend more time watching C-SPAN. But since there is so much more time, we are getting a little bit more into what each other likes. Does that make sense, or am I just babbling here?
Makes sense to me. And I think that Jean may have some more questions to ask you. Do we have some time for that, Jean?
We certainly do. Our next question is actually coming from Facebook. And the question is coming from Gabriella. And Gabriella is asking, we're two hardworking parents with 4 kids. Trying to get along can be a challenge in the same household. Any advice?
Want to take a look at that one, Julia? Barry?
Yeah, because we don't have little kids, so I'm sure they know better.
Well, we haven't had little kids for a very long time either. But it is really, really challenging for families with the kids in the home, parents working, and when the kids are in school, and I hope your school has already let out, because that would be a relief. You're helping them with their schoolwork or their meetings with their teachers. It's crazy. And so I think the first thing you have to do is stop having a standard. You just have to get through your day and do your best. 4 kids is, you have a team. So you have to try to schedule, like I said before, set up a schedule for everyone so that everyone gets some attention and you get some time to yourself, which I'm sure you need. And you both get some work done. But it is unbelievably challenging right now.
Yeah, I think muddling through sometimes is good enough, and this is one of those times.
Yes, it certainly is. We're all kind of muddling through and finding that it's not so bad, actually. There are some really good things about it. I like the fact that I can hear the birds. I don't hear traffic out of my window all the time. And I, like you, are spending a lot more time with my significant other and family members as well. Jean, I want to give you a chance to give your people who are waiting an opportunity to ask questions if there are more.
All right. We have a call from Shirley from Texas.
Shirley from Texas. What's your
Hi,
question?
this is Shirley. We've been married for 38 years. How do you keep the sexual pleasure going? About 4 years ago, we kind of started to whittling down to almost nothing.
Well, that's a good question, and I know you deal with that in your book. Julia and Barry, what do you say?
Here's a picture of our book.
Oh, there's your book. Yes.
Put that in August.
I know that you do ask the questions about the sexual relationship. Do you have an answer for our caller from Texas?
Sure. It is not unusual what you're describing, that sometimes in many relationships, the sexual relationship sort of falls by the wayside. Sometimes it's because of medical issues with either partner that for whatever reason, the person might be embarrassed to deal with them. They're avoidant. They think they're going to be judged by their partner. There's a million reasons why people just sort of let it trickle away. But it's a really important part of your relationship. When it's missing, it really does impact how intimate you feel and how close you feel to each other. So we recommend to couples that they go see a doctor and make sure that they can treat whatever medical issues might be there. And then beyond that, they can do some things to sort of reignite that spark. So here's a couple of examples. Get a fancy recipe, a complicated recipe, and cook a fancy dinner together and have it under candlelight. Sit under a blanket together and watch a romantic movie. Give each other massages. Start gradually integrating more touch and more playfulness into the relationship that you have so that you get more and more comfortable and you rebuild that intimate trust that may have dissipated a little bit. And then work your way toward more and more intimacy as both of you feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, the other barrier to sexual relationship is sometimes people develop anxiety around performing, as Julie said, especially if they've had a medical issue or they're not able to perform at the high standard they did when they were 25 years old and strapping and healthy. So we and then people are afraid that if they don't perform at a level and they don't please their partner the way they did at one time, that the disappointment will really be shaming to them, so that they become avoidant of not only sex, but of any kind of touch that might lead to sex. And so that it really drives a wedge in the intimacy with partners that they really need to sit down and talk about and find new ways of connecting physically, because as Julie says, it is so important as a way of nurturing the emotional part of the relationship, to have that physical part too.
Marlo and Phil, did this issue come up at all with the 40 celebrity couples that you talked to?
They talked about Allie Wentworth, who's married to George Stephanopoulos, just said that she felt that sex and having a lot of it was really important, and that if you weren't having it, then something was wrong and you had to, get to it. I mean, I don't think anybody has the expertise and information that Julie and Barry have, but
who did Tushy to Tushy?
Oh yeah, Judy Viors and her husband Milton sleep in a double bed, and which is very small. I mean, we have a king size bed. I mean, a double bed is smaller than what you ever have in a hotel. And she said they've always had it because they felt that if they slept tushy to tushy, it was hard to be mad at each other. But I got the feeling, really, we never asked anybody about their sex life. It just came out in the conversation. But we got the feeling as we left each couple that there was a lot of romance there, that they talked about candlelight and wine and being alone at night and snuggling and spooning and that kind of stuff. And I think, when you spoon at night, which we do, and hug onto each other, there's something in that that's so intimate, just your toes touching, your bodies touching, that is so personal that you don't do with anybody else.
I'm starting to get a little warm.
Well, I mean, we talked about, all of us talked about that, about that the physicality, the body that so well that's next to you, that that when you're doing that, when your tushies are touching, when you're spooning at night and all that, that keeps the warm blood going, so that sexual activity isn't such a leap across the desert to get to, because you're touching a lot. And I think that's kind of what Julie and Barry were saying in a more clinical way. But most of these couples talked about the fact that they, none of them slept in separate beds. They talked about the fact that some of their parents had slept in separate beds or in a separate room for reasons like noise or snoring or whatever, but none of these couples did. So it was just interesting that these marriages lasted for all those reasons, that that touching and intimacy and talking to each other. I think it would be very hard to be intimate physically with somebody that you weren't talking to a lot, that you weren't able to get your feelings out.
Oh, that's a good point. And intimacy is important, I think, in any way, shape, or form to keeping a relationship going. Marlo and Phil, Julie and Barry, before we close, can we share with our audience what is inspiring you during this trying time for our country? Could you each share what you feel?
Well, what's inspiring me is the way people are marching for justice. I mean, I really, we haven't gone out at all because we're in our 80s and you're not supposed to go out, and we haven't. We go to the park when we can see from our window the park, and we go out for like a walk or something. So we've been kind of isolated, but I'm very moved and excited by the fact that people are taking what's going on in our country to the personally and wanting to be a part of changing things. And I just, I'm excited about that, because and that inspires me that even in these times when it's kind of dangerous to be out, they're going out with their masks and everything, but they want to change the world for a better, more just place, and that is so inspiring to me.
Here, here. I agree. I agree totally. I am, you know, I don't know whether anybody truly understood the hidden prejudices that existed within our community of Americans. And this explosion of demonstrations aimed at people who may have been victimized over the years is, I think, exciting. I'm not sure everybody would use that word, but I truly believe that we have crossed the Rubicon here, and that more and more people are able to now express what has bothered them. You know, when Trump was first elected, I was very depressed. I felt that the patriots stayed home, and the people who were flag wavers were the ones who voted him in. And I was angry at the people who didn't vote. And now I see all these demonstrations everywhere, and I'm saying to myself, these are people who haven't voted much, and now they're going to. So I see that as a huge breakthrough for this nation and for the future of our grandchildren. I think it's going to be a better world because of it.
Well, we certainly could use a better world, and I think as we look out at some of the things that have happened recently, we all can get behind that, working toward a better place for us all to live. And I'd like to hear from Julia and Barry. What is inspiring them during this time?
Well, everything the two of you just said, we absolutely agree with you. In addition, I want to say that I know I'm feeling extremely inspired by all of the medical staff, professionals, paraprofessionals, everyone who has been risking their lives to take care of COVID patients. And not just that community of amazing people, but the people who deliver groceries or who go out and do things that we need to have happen in our culture just to keep going, who are risking their lives and who are taking chances on behalf of the rest of our communities. I just think those people they really need to be applauded.
And I agree with everything that's been said. I just want to add that those folks who are working in behavioral health treatment, who were the counselors, who were the psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, licensed professional counselors, these folks have done yeoman's work thus far, and the expectation is in the months ahead, there are going to be many more Americans who unfortunately are going to have more emotional problems because of everything that we've been going through. And our behavioral health workforce is inspiring me and will continue to inspire me, I think, for some time to come, because of how they're helping support Americans get through this.
We discovered a lot of new heroes in our country, and I think we want to celebrate them going forward. And we thank the four of you for joining us to have this very interesting discussion. Good luck with both of your books, and I, having seen both of them, I'm looking forward to having a chance to sit down. And since I'm quarantined, I'll be able to sit down and maybe read front to back of both books. We thank all of you, AARP members, volunteers, and listeners, for participating in this discussion today. AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan member organization, has been working to promote the health and well-being of older Americans for more than 60 years. In the face of this crisis, we're providing information and resources and fighting for older adults and those caring for them. All of the resources referenced, including a recording of today's Q&A event, can be found at aarp.org/coronavirus on June 19th. Again, that web address is aarp.org/coronavirus. We hope that you've enjoyed today's conversation and learned something that can help you strengthen your relationships over time. Please be sure to tune in Thursday, July 9th, that's Thursday, July the 9th, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for our next Teletown Hall. But before you go, please enjoy a few moments with Marlo and Phil with these delightful videos. They are wonderful to look at. Again, to our guests, thank you so much for being with us. I've enjoyed this, and I'm sure all those listening and watching have absolutely enjoyed it as well. I'm Barbara Harrison. Good night to all of you.
You are really fascinating. And
No, but you are wonderful. I said it when we were off there, and I want to say you are loving and generous, and you like women, and it's a pleasure. And whoever is the woman in your life is very lucky.
Well, thank you very much.
The secret of good communication, screaming helps. At least you get to know whether the person you're screaming at is listening. And, then go in the other room and count to 10.
Through the years, you learn that everything is not that big a deal, and this isn't going to break us up no matter what. So you get used to saying, okay, let's just talk it out.
And a little humor, certainly in a marriage, goes a long way.
The book is called What Makes a Marriage Last. We were thinking that we were putting together a book that would have a lot of tips about how to have a great marriage. But the more we got into it, we realized it's what is it that makes it last?
We interviewed Sting.
And Trudy.
And Trudy.
Elton and David.
We interviewed
Rob Reiner and Michelle, and Ron Howard and Cheryl. Mehmet Oz and Lisa, and Sanjay Gupta and Rebecca, and Alan Alda and Arlene Alda.
Underneath all of these interviews, these people really cared. They wanted it to last. If there's any common theme to the chats that we had, it's you have to want to have a long marriage.
You see what they did when they were confronted with the loss of a loved one, infidelity, losing their money. What makes a marriage last is what you do when you're confronted with the really big stuff. I was so intimidated working with him because, he's like the greatest interviewer in the world. When we had the Elton John interview, we got word that we'd only have a half hour. Well, I went into complete panic mode because we had, this many questions and all kinds of ideas. And so while I'm figuring that out and trying to come up with the questions, he's turned on the TV and is watching a ball game.
Every day of my show life, I was just accustomed to one guest usually per hour and me. It was a high wire act for me every day. I'd run out in the audience with my wireless mic. You didn't know what was going to happen.
He'd say, I never prepared a question. I just went with it. I'm not Phil Donahue. I just can't go with it. I have to be a little bit prepared.
You have to take it pretty seriously at the beginning. And if you don't, I think many couples are doomed.
I didn't get married until I was 40, which if you don't get married till you're 40, you have a lot of relationships. And I was always looking for an exit. So I think for me, marriage is about making the commitment that there is no exit. And that makes it better, somehow richer.
This is our chance to remind you to subscribe
to AARP YouTube channel and watch it. Obviously, we don't know each other, which is why our marriage is so great, because we're still learning about each other. Who are you, anyway? Hi, I'm Marlo Thomas.
I'm Phil Donahue.
We've been married 40 years.
And we're going to find out how well we know each other.
Uh-oh.
Marlo, what was your first job?
In the theater.
No, school teacher. Your first job.
My first job was in the theater.
She's going to be embarrassed.
What'd you say? Oh, no, I never taught.
You never had a classroom?
No, I did student teaching, but I didn't get paid.
Well, oh.
It wasn't a job, it was to get my degree.
Phil, what is your idea of a romantic date?
Phil's idea of a romantic date? Aha.
That's easy. That would be going bowling.
Oh, no, come on, you gotta answer the question. What do you think I would say that you would say? I think staying home. Staying home and being together and ordering takeout and being by ourselves.
Sitting on a park bench and expressing how I feel without being interrupted by, you know.
Okay, well,
Holy
that's,
cow.
all right, you wanna know what I said? I said, staying home.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Well, that is what you would think.
Probably is, now that you mention it.
Marlo, what are you most likely to argue about?
Her clothing.
His watching football and me wanting to go to the theater. What is it? Oh, we don't argue about my clothing. Oh, well, if I wear something low cut. Yeah, that's true.
Too much boobage.
Phil, what is your favorite episode of That Girl?
I don't even know that he's watched That Girl.
The episode where she got her finger stuck in a bowling ball.
It was my toe, but that's okay.
Oh, toe.
And my answer was, he didn't watch That Girl. I know what his favorite Donahue show is when I was on it. We met on his Donahue show.
Whoever is the woman in your life is very lucky.
Well, thank you very much.
Phil, what is your favorite episode of the Phil Donahue Show?
Oh, that's a toughie. The show where my guest was Marlo Thomas.
Yeah, you win. The one where you first met me. You got one.
Last question, Marlo. What is your favorite song?
Marlo's favorite song. Oh, dear.
My favorite song is,
Oh, I'd love to ask her now, because I know when she says it, I'm going to say, oh, yeah.
Something in the way she walks, da, 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 da. That, and it moves me. And Elton John singing, don't go breaking my heart.
See, this is why I know her. I mean, intimately.
I can't wait. What is this? Blue tea. What? I don't, is that a song?
I don't know. Yeah.
You hummed it earlier.
Da, 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 da.
Oh, that's from Austria. Oh, that's so funny. Well, we've certainly proven that we don't communicate. Well, this is why our marriage has lasted, because we are still learning about each other. We're not bored. We don't know anything.
Blue Danube, you could live another 200 years and you would never come up with that
No, that's
answer.
right.
This is our chance to remind you to subscribe
To AARP YouTube channel and watch it.